So, welcome everyone. We've been discussing zero trust in these broadcasts in terms of capabilities and business cases, but today we're here to dig deeper and talk about defining zero trust more precisely and clearing up some common misconceptions. BTA's founder and CEO, Ken Fee, is here to help us do just that. Hi, Ken.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, so before we get started on misconceptions, how about we, just go over what the more precise, accurate definition of zero trust is?
Yeah, sure. No, that's great. And precise and accurate is all relative. And zero trust means lots of different things to lots of different people. It's kind of like cloud. But let's talk about how Nist defines what zero trust is, because that's really where the core is. And what zero trust is really the evolution of security architectures to focus on users, assets, and resources, and doing that in a dynamic way versus only relying on what we would consider traditional static perimeter-based solutions, firewalls, IDS, IPS. You place those at different parts of the network. And this all starts with one of my favorite X-Files references of trust no one. And that's what zero trust really means. And it doesn't mean that we don't trust our employees or we don't trust authorized users. But what it means is we really need to understand what are the data flows within our applications that make them go, from the end users within our enterprise that access those applications, and even what the flows look like out to the internet, whether it's to partners or to customers, that we're providing data or we're collaborating with. And then we've really got to focus on how do we authenticate and authorize not just people, but the machines to connect to those resources. And, the world has changed in the last 18, 24 months. With COVID, BYOD, or bring your own device, was driving this change before COVID even, because the nature of the workforce is become much more distributed, and COVID only further accelerated that. And so this is why we can't just use a static places in the network model by themselves. We still need firewalls. We still need IDS and IPS. They're part of the overall solution. But we've really got to get much more granular about the flows to address the threat today. And that threat, has really evolved. And the tools that we have at our disposal to mitigate threats, they're very different than even, just a couple of years ago. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, they're being used by the attackers and some of the defenders. We see more and more people implementing AI, ML solutions, not only for operations, but for security operations. And they become more commonplace. And, it used to take months to deploy these things. And now, in some cases, you can deploy these solutions in a matter of minutes in the cloud. And so zero trust is not a product. It's a strategy. It's an architecture. And it's really about having that architecture in place, with combining it with policy, people, and technical controls to identify who's accessing the information: employees, partners, customers. Are they allowed to access it? Have I done a good job of classifying data? Do I know what I want to expose to the outside world? Do I know who in my company is allowed to access something? What are we doing with corporate secrets? Where are they accessing it from? Do I have the ability to visualize or have visibility? Is an employee accessing something from an iPad in a country that they shouldn't be accessing it from because of risk? And an example here, would I allow a customer to make a direct query from the internet to a database server of mine? Obviously not. And I probably have a rule in place that prevents that. That's kind of the, layered approach to security. But if I do give them access to a front end server that has access probably via a middleware server, and maybe I've got some unpatched vulnerabilities because of a particular app development lifecycle hasn't been able to address a particular CVE, then that window's open. And and it boils down to, do you have that end-to-end visibility and security all the way from the client or the endpoint through to the workload, whether it's in the cloud or in your on-prem or co-location based data center? Take a look at what's happened, recently around ransomware attacks across a bunch of different industries: energy, transportation, agriculture, medical, health insurance, media. Those are just a few. There's been attacks in all of those industries for different reasons. The attackers, on the energy side, they were after money. They were looking for a ransom. In others, they're looking for information or to be able to publish a movie that hadn't been posted yet, hadn't been released to streaming. And the common thread through all of this is either critical data has been lost, or it's been held ransom for millions of dollars. And sometimes those ransoms get paid with only a hope that the attacker will actually give you the key so that you can reconstitute your data. And if you choose not to pay the ransom, which the FBI would prefer that you not, at least in the United States, now you've got to restore from a known good backup. And that becomes a challenge because if you don't know when you were breached, how do you pick a good recovery point while also assuming that your backups are good? So the bottom line is, whether it's a gas shortage slowing down of your delivery, the delivery of medical care, or the delivery of your Amazon packages, this is a problem that impacts everybody. It's not just a technology problem for businesses. It's a technology problem that literally impacts everybody in their lives, their day-to-day lives. And another big pain point, business pain point at the moment is the ability to acquire cyber risk insurance. Most people have had cyber risk insurance for some number of years. And now with these proliferation of attacks, we're seeing the cyber insurance companies come back and take a look at the policies they've written with customers. Either the renewals are going way up, or the deductibles are going way up, or it's not an either or, it might be both. Or they may cancel your policy if you don't have the right kind of controls in place to mitigate mitigate these evolving advanced persistent threats.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Zero Trust sounds like something everyone should be using to secure their business, from devastating ransomware attacks, phishing attacks, all of that. And why don't we get into the myths and the misconceptions?
Sure. That sounds great. So, one common myth is there's only one way to start down a zero trust path, and just, the thing I want to remind people here is zero trust is an architecture, a way of thinking, a way of protecting data. It's not a product. There are a lot of technology controls that you can put in place that will help you get down a path with zero trust. Network access control is something that I think has become much more mature. We were talking about network access control when I worked at Cisco in 2004, 2005. Those solutions have really matured significantly over the last 15, 16 years. And now people without network access control, basically an admission, an authentication before you can even connect to the network, that's more the exception than the norm. That's not to say there aren't organizations that haven't implemented network access control. That's one component of zero trust. Single sign-on authentication, being able to authenticate a user for access to enterprise or cloud-based resources. It's really, it comes down to it's no one thing. You've got to defend and apply controls throughout your environment. It's not just about the network. It's not just about the end user. It's not just about authentication. It's the culmination of all of those things, and taking the right steps to protect your most important information, whether it's data on a server or proprietary software logic, a la the SolarWinds hack, where the attackers actually compromised the software supply chain. So that's really I don't like to focus on one thing, but you do have to identify what are your most critical vulnerabilities. And one area we see obviously is the servers in the data center. Whether they're talking to themselves or something could be compromised. We can put lots of technical controls in place, but if we've got a user that falls prey to a phishing attack that has the right credential, they might click something that would obviate all the controls because that person was authorized to do something. People make mistakes.
Yeah.
So workload protection is a core component of Zero Trust, but so is network access control, end user authentication, BYOD validation, profiling devices that connect to the network. Zero Trust is it's a journey. It's not a just, hey, snap my fingers and I'm done. It takes time. And it really comes down to how do you understand your environment? Do you understand what your true business flows are? And then how do we start eliminating the extraneous flows, the things that could open up your environment to a breach or a vulnerability? So, and I think I hit this just a minute ago, but myth number 2 is, Zero Trust is a product or a set of products. No one vendor has every product required to address Zero Trust. They'll all say that they do, but there's always gaps in that, and that's why you've got to take a somewhat vendor agnostic approach. There are vendors that bring a lot of different things together under one umbrella. What you've got to do is look at what are the right tools and technologies that fit into your operational processes to help secure that environment. Myth number 3. Zero Trust solves a technology problem. And I think I've said this a few times already, and I'll say it again. Zero Trust is an architecture. We use technology to solve architecture defines how we're going to protect things. We talk in the paradigm of Zero Trust is a security architecture. We use technology to solve the business problems enumerated by that security architecture, also by the threat. You can lock things down so tight that your users will become non-productive. And that's a technology problem that gets imposed on users where it becomes so cumbersome to access something. You've got to be able to do something that is reasonably, it's never going to be friction free, but you want as little friction as possible when it comes to deploying these technologies. And this is where using AI and ML solutions to analyze flows, analyze all the flows and build policies based on those flows and app developer knowledge and network infrastructure and security ops infrastructure knowledge, and meld all that into a cohesive policy that is manageable. We talk to customers, their AI ML tool did an analysis of the environment, and they said, oh, well, for this app, you need 3,000 rules. For this app, you need, 4,500 rules. And that is not a sustainable operational paradigm there when you're talking about thousands of rules for a collection of 10 or 50 servers. Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to identify what are the rules you need to put in place. What's the explicit communication you need to allow. Uh, and the myth here is, myth number 4 I'm going to talk about, and we'll kind of wrap it up and maybe open it up for some questions. But zero trust is difficult to implement. Zero trust is no more difficult to implement than any other enterprise-wide initiative. It requires a vision. It requires business buy-in. It requires that the business understands that there is a problem to be solved. And then if you've got those things, you've got those 3 things in place, then we can move forward, because we understand what are the problems, what are the use cases, what are the challenges, and then we can start to pick tools and do it in small chunks. Nobody, like I said at the beginning, nobody snaps their fingers in our zero trust. But if you've got a good central single sign-on, network access control might be the next step if you don't have that in place. Most people have that in place. So now we're looking at, how do we protect workloads? How do we protect end users from accidentally clicking on a link? And there's all kinds of tools out there, proxies. The various vendors offer solutions to some of those problems, but there is no solution to that really smart person that has got 55 things going on from a project's perspective, and somebody impersonating somebody that person thinks that they know sends them an email and they click the link. Or, we try to stay ahead of that stuff, but and there's also just straight up phishing, people making phone calls, social engineering. So we try to put technical controls in place to avoid that downside, because humans make errors and computers will do what you allow them to do. The key here with zero trust is allow the things that that are absolutely good, versus denying the things you know about and then permitting everything else. And there's a lot of customers out there still that are living in that environment.
All right, wonderful. I want to know, do you have any closing comments for our audience, or?
No, we don't have any questions. Any questions in the stream? Okay, great. No. Well, big thanks everyone for joining today. Again, we try to keep these short and on point. If you want to have a conversation about how to get started with zero trust and how it can solve some immediate challenges in your business, we're doing a zero trust workshop, and that's free. It's targeted at the technical and business decision makers in an organization to start to triage and plan out what a zero trust strategy would look like. We've got a link in the comments. Jen's done a phenomenal job of pulling this event together. And I'm gonna throw it back to you, Jen. Thanks again for everybody attending.
Thanks, Ken. And I just want to let everybody know, if you have any questions about the Zero Trust Workshop, please reach out to me. Reach out to me if you have any questions about BTA whatsoever. And as always, visit gobta.com. Thank you. Have a good day.
Cheers.